Hi, welcome back, everybody. We've got Brian Stelter with us now. Brian's been at our summit a few times, and he's the terrific host of CNN's Reliable Sources. He's also a great journalist. Brian's always on top of the latest breaking developments in media and all things about media. Please welcome Brian, and don't forget the question bar on the side of the viewer. First, Brian, good to see you, and congrats on your growing family.
Thank you. Great to be here. I have escaped for a couple of hours to get some work done today, but of course, the best is yet to come. I've got a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and they both recognize the CNN logo in the corner of the screen already. So I'm clearly doing something right.
Daddy's logo. That is great. Boy, you've got your hands full these days. There's not any dearth of news going on. Um, Brian, we've had Frank Luntz here at the beginning of this week, and I interviewed him, and he discussed with me his polling that is showing, and he's a Republican pollster, but his polling is showing Trump at a serious loss. Yet the early returns, of course, will favor Trump, and then post-election with the mail-ins and other balloting will show Biden as a winner. Evidently, this is going to forecast much confusion at best and awful rancor and disruption at worst. Also sounds somewhat similar to what Tom Friedman has been telling you on your show. And I want to, in a moment, ask you if the press is prepared for this. But before we get to that, just tell me, Brian, what's it like being a host of a media show and a media reporter during Trump time, or more specifically, during an election year? Boy, tell us.
It's like having 100 gallons of news in only a 10-gallon bucket, and it is always overflowing. That's always true to some degree. I always think, Barry, there's 20 different stories I could be covering any Sunday, and I have to choose from those 20. But now it feels like there's 200 instead of 20 stories to cover. So prioritizing and curating and honing in on what is the real news and what's just noise. That's, like, I think, an increasing part of the job for all sorts of news anchors.
That's got to be a real art and science that I think as you develop that strategy, it will be a lesson for the Columbia School of Journalism for years to come. So tell us, there could be a lot of confusion, there could be a lot of rancor if this does not get decided, which it probably won't on Election Day. Is the press prepared to cover this, Brian?
I think there have been preparations underway for months already, in addition to all the usual rehearsals. Like always, by the end of October, there are rehearsals happening in television newsrooms for election night. But this year is different because the election's already underway. And I think news executives, producers, anchors, decision desk members are all aware of the unique challenges due to mail-in balloting, due to Trump's threats against the election. I think there's a heightened awareness of the challenges. Preparations have started earlier than normal this season. And there's all these different scenarios about the way it could go, right? If Florida breaks for Biden early on, that's going to be a very early indication of what's about to happen in the coming hours. If Florida is much more contested or tighter, that's going to be another scenario that may play out. So I think what we're seeing in these rehearsals and these practice sessions are try out these scenarios and figure out what the reactions to all of those would be. In terms of decision desk, calculating all the math that goes into these decision projections. I think the most important thing, Barry, is for nobody to make any premature projections. For Fox and CNN and ABC and all the rest to be very careful and very precise. And I think what we've seen this year, which is a really good thing, is news anchors like Jake Tapper are already talking to the audience, trying to explain how it's going to work and why it might take longer than normal. We have an educational role to play to explain how that works.
That's a good point. And when you talk about no one's going to, or no one should make any early projections or decide any winners, Twitter, for instance, has said they will either not run any candidate accepting the presidency, or they will do it with certain terms and definitions.
Right.
Is that the right
It's amazing how these social platforms have come so far in 4 years. I know that there's a lot of people that have a lot of gripes with Twitter and Facebook, myself included. I said on my show last Sunday, it's like 4 years ago, they were newborn babies, and now they're learning how to walk, but they still have a long way to go. But, consider the difference between a newborn and an infant. The fact that Twitter is now saying, If someone declares to be the victor and the networks have not called them the victor, we are going to flag that tweet. That kind of editorial involvement was not happening 4 years ago. So we have seen significant changes by these platforms.
It's always been a dilemma up until recently where these companies seem to have a following as if they're a media company, but they would really just say they were an aggregator, and it was a dynamic tension. Finally, it looks like it's being released.
Boy, they are seeing how hard it is to be in an editorial role. You don't make a lot of friends, you do make a lot of enemies. That's the reality of the news business. And yet, Americans do trust some form of news. Look at polls that show that you sometimes hear about distrust in media, and I say no. There's not distrust in media. People trust different forms of media. So I trust the New York Times, and my uncle trusts Fox News. Trust has been polarized, but everybody trusts some form of media. It's just we trust different sources. And I think on election night, on big moments in American history, on severe weather days, it shows us that there is trust in media. At the end of the day, most people do want to just figure out what is true in the world. And these platforms, they are under increasing obligations to help people do that.
Twitter, just to talking about the platforms, Twitter took off a story from the New York Post on Biden on the Ukraine. And then they said, well, maybe they overstepped. To your point, it's challenging hitting the right balance. Do we think they did the right thing by stepping in aggressively and then kind of pulling back a little bit?
I have not really made up my mind about this Twitter move, because this was a very dramatic move by Twitter to make it so you can't even post a link to the story. Now, if this is a Russian disinformation campaign, then that choice may be much more justifiable. I don't think we know enough yet about the origins of this New York Post story in order to say if Twitter is taking the right steps or not. But what they are doing is they are fueling this culture war, this sense of two alternative realities. One reality that's based in CNN and the AP and the Washington Post and all those major brands, and then this other reality that is the Fox News, InfoWars, Daily Caller reality. I think this election is a large part about these two competing universes of information. And look, I'm at CNN. I would argue that the CNN-based kind of version of reality is at least striving for the truth, checks and balances. We have standards and practices. We hold ourselves accountable when we screw up. That's what I look for in these news divisions. Not that they're always perfect, but that they're striving for accuracy. And that's what I think all consumers should demand.
Yeah, and you're right. There are two kind of echo chambers, two universes. When I spoke to Frank Luntz, he said he wants to deliver Elmos to everybody because the acronym is enough. Let's move on. And how do we get the country together? And it's a nice sentiment. You were talking about Fox and the New York Post. So the world of Murdoch. Maureen Dowd, as you probably read, did an introspective interview with James, who talked about how he was pulling the ripcord. He didn't seem comfortable with the direction it was going. What is the post Roger Ailes world of Murdochville looking like, and where do you think it goes from here, and where do you think it goes if Trump wins or loses?
Well, I'm out on my book tour for Hoax, which is all about Trump and Fox in the last 5 years. And at the end, there really is a cliffhanger. There's this scenario that President Trump, if he loses election, he'll go off and launch a Fox News rival. I personally have doubts about that. I think it would be very hard to do. I think Fox has an incredible monopoly power. They are extraordinarily successful in right-wing media, and it'll be very hard to take them on. But, it's possible. Anything's possible, I suppose, with Donald Trump. I think Fox is bigger than Trump, though, and Fox will do just fine regardless of whether Trump or Biden wins the election. With regards to the Murdochs, I think the other cliffhanger is, will James Murdoch try to take over Fox Corporation? And the answer is yes. The answer is when Rupert Murdoch passes away, there will be a struggle for control of Fox Corporation, but no one knows if that's 5 years from now or 10 years from now or 15 years from now. Nobody knows, including James. But I do think that's it's not just season 3 of Succession. This is a real life plot, and it's only a matter of time. And then I can think where we take that is the ultimate question is, what does the audience want? Does the Fox audience want a more moderate version of the channel? or does the audience want far right, going further and further to the right? I think the answer is the audience wants more and more right-wing content. They want pro-Trump propaganda, not news. I'm speaking broadly, of course. There's an
Right,
audience for news on Vox as well,
right.
but there's a bigger audience for pro-Trump opinion, and that just speaks to the divide in the country. That's something that whoever runs Fox in the future has to reckon with.
How do we heal this country? It's a question everybody asks every day. You have folks on your show that are discussing it. Have you heard any directions that can get us to heal?
When I went to a Trump rally in 2018, and CNN made me bring a bodyguard with me, which I was really burdened by. I felt weird about it. I don't feel like I should need security at a Trump rally. But, it actually was really helpful because there was somebody there to watch my back so that I could relax and just be myself and just talk to Trump fans and not have to worry about whether somebody was going to come up and try to, throw a soda over my shoulder. What was really striking to me at that Trump rally was, sure, there were a few people who hurled insults at me and called me fake news, but most people just wanted to take selfies. Most people just wanted to ask me questions about CNN and ask me questions about Fox. Most people just wanted to have a conversation. And, I wish I could scale that. There's no way for me to scale that experience and go to every Trump rally and go to meet every Trump voter. But I truly think that most people are not caricatures. I'm not the caricature Sean Hannity says I am, and Trump voters are not the caricature that MSNBC sometimes portrays them to be. The more that we can have those real conversations, I think we can bring the temperature down. I know once in a while things get really heated, and on social media, it's a sewer, and there's all these loud voices yelling at each other. But I really think that when you have actual conversations with people, it brings the temperature down. Even the most loyal Fox fans in my world, in my neighborhood, they sometimes will joke about, my role at CNN, but we can then get past it and have real conversations. Obviously, though, there's a minority in the country that doesn't want to have those conversations, that has gone down this QAnon rabbit hole. That is very scary. And I don't know what the de-radicalization approach is for that minority, but it is a minority. I think most voters, Trump, Biden, whoever they're voting for, are open-minded and do want to have those conversations. So I am a believer with that experience at the rally. If we can keep replicating that, keep having those conversations. Maybe I'm naive, Barry. I don't think we are as divided as we look on Twitter. Obviously, we're divided, but I don't think we are as divided as we look on Facebook.
That's good to hear, and that's hopeful. And you're saying what is just important to business or life or family is good communication. Engaging really helps ameliorate most problems, but you got to talk.
And also beyond politics, right? When we can move away from the political conversation. Obviously, CNN and Fox right now and all the channels, we're focused on politics. We're living through a historic election in the midst of a horrible pandemic. But when we can move a little bit away from politics and talk about other issues, we can find connections there as well, right? I mean, I'm thinking about, CNN is so much more than politics, even though that's at our beating heart right now. Airport Network's been around since '92. When you're walking through, when you're watching, when you're waiting for your flight, thankfully some people are able to travel in the midst of this pandemic. The programming you're seeing on there is not just about Trump and Biden. And yes, and that can be sometimes divisive. It is also about lifestyle and about health and about wellness. And on those issues, people trust the media. I always think about what happens when there's a weather emergency, as a hurricane or a tornado coming. People trust their meteorologists in those moments. So yes, people can call CNN fake. They can call Fox fake. You can hurl slurs at the media. But when it really matters and when it affects your life, I think people know who to trust. They know what to trust. And that's what gives me confidence about these. Sometimes I call them old-fashioned brands because they've been around a while, right? The CNNs and the ABCs and the Reuters and the Washington Posts. The reason they've been around for a while is because they are trusted and they are trying to get it right.
And I'm glad you mentioned CNN Airport's a great DPW member, and they do a great job in communicating. And like you said, it's not just political news, but it's lifestyle and everything else.
It also is why the CNN brand connects with people, right? We don't connect with the reason that I'm sometimes recognized in airports is not because I'm on, for my program on Sunday. It's because I'm on doing guest hits during the week. It's because I'm on during breaking news. Every minute of CNN, What really matters is the cumulative effect of these brands, right? Being there 24/7, being there when something really bad happens in the world or when something really good happens in the world. I know we haven't had much of that lately, but, that is the other value of these brands. That's why we need to be everywhere, in home and out of home. We need to be available everywhere because when you feel the earth shake, literally or metaphorically, you want to turn to the CNN of the world to know what happened.
That's great. And I like the term you keep using about video everywhere, which is the name of our conference every year. And it is true. I mean, the video is everywhere, including outside the home everywhere. And, we've expanded our global membership now where we go from Times Square to Piccadilly to Indian train stations and all over. And it's always great to have you here. So kind of back to all democracy needs an active media. We need an active, well-funded and accurate media. Do you think, Brian, do we have the right journalists, the proper funding at the local, national, and global levels these days to keep good, consistent media coverage and ergo democracy?
Well, we certainly have big problems at the local level. There's no denying that. And I think to the extent that people become more aware in the United States of the local news crisis, that's a good thing because they can be encouraged to sign up, to pay, to support local news, and make a difference in that way. I think on the national level, we've got a robust media with a lot of points of view and a lot of content. And I think, you talk about international. What's happened in the last 10 years is because of the rise of smartphones, I'm able to watch any channel around the world, any TV news source at any time. That's an extraordinary benefit to the public to be able to get so many flavors of news. However, it can be confusing, chaotic. You never know what's true and what to believe. I think increasingly journalists have to play this role of being the verification layer for the world, for the news. Everybody's a member of the media now because everybody has Instagram and YouTube. So everybody's producing media. Journalists, in order to help democracy, increasingly have to curate and verify and vet all that information and tell you what's reliable and what's not. So with the New York Post, it's murky. There are real warning signs about whether those documents are legit. And so we're going to stay away from them until we know more. Like that's a vetting and verification kind of behavior that newsrooms have to use more and more in order to uphold democracy. I don't think it's partisan to demand and defend facts and decency and democracy. It is not partisan to do that. That is advocating on behalf of the audience for reliable information and representation in the political sphere. And one of the things what's great about CNN in the past few years is that's what the anchors are doing, trying to demand decency and facts and democracy.
That's great points. So tonight we have dueling town halls. If I would say, Brian Stelter, is this a service or disservice? What would Brian say?
It's such a disservice. And hey, look, the reasons why it happened, it's the reason why anything happens. It's not a conspiracy. It's not, out of malicious fault. It's just a bunch of network executives trying to make scheduling decisions, caught up in their own worlds. And now it's a mess, right? NBC wanted to do 8 p.m. because that's when Biden was on last week. NBC thought ABC would put their town hall at 9 p.m., but ABC put it at 8 and ABC went first. And then you get into these petty network rivalries. And then you get into the situation where, why don't they just call each other and work it out? And well, last night, somebody at NBC did call over to ABC and said, hey, ABC, you move your town hall. And they said, no, we did this first. We booked ours first. And by the way, Biden doesn't want to move probably to 9 p.m. So you're right. We're going to have this ridiculous clash of town halls. I think the reality, Barry, is viewers lost on the minute the debate was canceled. There should have been a debate tonight. That's the real failure here. These town halls are helpful. They'll be useful, but it's no replacement for real debate.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And actually, we're going to take some questions now from our audience, and that relates to Scott Bender of Prohaska Consulting. Did ask that question. So Scott, I had that question ready already, Scott, but thank you for it. Actually, another question we have from Rich Goldfarb here, who actually was a Turner guy for many, many years. And this kind of goes to, if I would say to you, Brian, peaceful transition of power, what would you say? Meaning
we should demand and expect nothing less. This goes back to journalists defending democracy, and that includes a peaceful transfer of power. My gut tells me There's so many people worried, obviously, so many people on edge for lots of different reasons. And I think it's that preparation, it's that being on edge, it's that thinking through the scenarios that will actually result in an anticlimactic election period. I can't believe I just said that. I might be proven wrong, but that is my current prediction. I think this is one of those situations where people have put their armor on, people have suited up, people have taken all the proper precautions. And when you do that, you come out just fine the other end.
So I understand the strategy. Tactically, if Trump declares victory early, what does CNN do?
I think that's a scenario that's being talked about. I asked Sam Feist, the head of the DC bureau, about that. I said, would we broadcast the speech live? And I'm hoping to get answers to those questions before Election Day. But some of those are going to have to be decisions in the moment. Let's be honest, right, about how this works. If the president says he's about to speak and you don't know what he's going to say, there is typically an instinct to carry it live and to show it and see what happens. I think what's most important is that we surround Trump, or we surround Biden, surround the candidates with the truth. We used to talk about a truth sandwich. I used to talk about this in the early on in the Trump years, a truth sandwich. Start with the truth, put the claim in the middle, and then go back to the truth. And so you surround the claim or the lie with the truth. That's the best thing we can do to help people know what's actually real.
I love the truth sandwich. So 4 years ago, the polls were, indicating that Trump was going to lose, maybe a pro-Clinton bias around the sample. We do hear, and even Frank Luntz says that at times people won't say they're voting for Trump if they do. Frank actually said, he declared the national vote or the non-electoral vote. And how do you folks in your coverage deal with the polls this year, given that, largely they were off last time?
I think people are always fighting the last battle. People are always overcorrecting for the errors in past election cycles. This year, what I see are a lot of focus, people pointing out this is a poll that's only a snapshot in time. I'm noticing a lot more of that kind of careful language, cautious language in stories and in news coverage. I'm also noticing a lot more reliance on averaging of many polls together so that people see all of those, and more focus on state polls. So people know that the national polls may not reflect what's happening on battleground states, what's happening on the local level. Those state polls ultimately are going to matter more. And we will be able to judge, in mid-November, the state polls versus the results and see if they were more accurate this time.
You ever chat with Howard Kurtz at all?
So Howie, my 11 a.m. competitor on Fox. No, actually, I've seen him once ever since I was taking over at CNN, and I never get to watch his show because I'm on at the same time.
Right. No, exactly. Yeah. Well, look, you do a great job, and it's so key for democracy. You want to just tell us where your book's available before we head out?
Yeah, thank you for the mention. Hoax is at buyhoax.com. It is a look at the last 5 years through the prism of Fox and how Fox has covered the Trump years. And if I didn't write it all down, if we didn't all live it, if we didn't all experience together, I think none of us would have believed what's happened in the past 5 years. Some of it I've already forgotten. You go back to 3 years ago, what was happening in 2017. There were things that I have totally forgotten by now. By the way, you know what today is, Barry? It's the 3-year anniversary of the Me Too hashtag going viral, becoming an internationally recognized movement. 3 years ago today. You think about how much the world's changed in the Trump years, in some ways for worse, in some ways for the better, and it keeps spinning and changing.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. We developed a big global program called We Do, Women's Empowerment in Digital Out of Home. And it's a series of webinars and seminars and learnings and structure talking about how women can improve personal and professional lives and develop. And it's been great. And look, there's been a lot of elements that have happened in society and news, and hopefully we're getting on the right side of it. Carrie, this is going to be my last question to Brian, and I'm so glad you've got the book out. There's been probably there's maybe 300, but maybe 150 books on Trump in particular that are of note. How do people and the populace consume the media of book these days? We know how they're consuming social. We know how they're consuming television, broadcast, and cable. as well. And the books come out with big headlines, every time there's another Trump book. What's been the effect on the populace and on the news cycle of books?
Well, there's been a real rise in print book sales this year, partly due to the pandemic. People have time at home, partly due to all these Trump books like Hoax and all the bigger ones like John Bolton's and Mary Trump's. There's also been a lot of pro-Trump books that have sold really well. There's this incredible swath of it. I think it just reflects the fact that people still are seeking to understand what the heck has happened, what is happening. There's still a desire to learn more and know more in that format, in that long form format. Because at the same time, Barry, that we have TikTok and Instagram, we also have these long form Netflix binges and these massive books. It just speaks to the idea that the future of media is all of the above, right? Radio didn't replace newspapers, and TV didn't replace radio, and the internet didn't replace TV. They all create room for each other. It creates more room for more consumption of media in more places at more times a day. And that's why the future of media is just more of all of it. There will be more books, even in print, and yet there will be more crazy TikToks and formats that I can't come up with. I wish I could think of what the next format would be, but it'll be something none of us have imagined yet.
Well, and it may be something like this. It may be some more kind of, Zoom closed circuit or other communication vehicles. But I always appreciate you because, like me, you're a student and a professor of media, and it's so important that we understand. And so important, as Brian Stelter says, to communicate, to talk to each other, to keep the conversation going. So remember, everybody, please do that. Please do that at Thanksgiving. Please do that with your friends, your families, people that may seem to be your arch enemies. Communicate. Brian, every year you join us with this, it's always so instructional and so important. And keep up the great work, because as I mentioned earlier, a great democracy needs a hardworking and important press. So, Brian, thank you so much again.
Thank you. Great to be here. Thanks.
Great to see you. And good luck with the family. Keep enjoying the growing family.
Thank you.
Great. Take care, pal.